Have you been waiting for the new Prado? Well, I've got some good news for you. It's here, it looks better, it's got more features, more towing capacity, and it's cheaper. But is it any good? Is it as good as that last Prado? Well, there's only one way to find out. Before we go for a spin, let's have a look at what's new. Now, it's no Picasso, but it looks better than it did before. New grille and new headlights. Interesting point with the headlights is Toyota has moved this bi-LED beam, which is standard on the top spec Kakadu, to the center. And that's to prevent you from losing your lights when you're off-road and you give that a whack on the outside, which is more likely where you're going to hit it. There's a new bonnet here as well with a deeper channel, and the outer edges are easier to see from the driver's seat, which makes it better for off-roading too. In terms of off-roading, they've also fixed this so you get a better approach angle, so that kicks upwards a little bit too. In terms of the interior, it's been updated beautifully. The instrument binnacle looks great, and the rest has just been rounded out nicely with that great infotainment system sitting at the top of the dashboard. The entire Prado range now comes with some excellent safety features, including autonomous emergency braking. It even includes pedestrian detection. So if a pedestrian accidentally steps out in front of you, this thing is going to pull up. The entire range is cheaper, and this Kakadu model is about $1,200 cheaper than it was previously, with the whole Prado range now kicking off from a little over $53,000. But the keynote here is the towing capacity. It's now 3,000 kilos, finally bringing this thing in line with the rest of its competitors. So if you're buying a Prado, you're likely to be doing a bit of off-road driving, or you're likely to be wanting to do a bit of off-road driving. And luckily, this thing is really well equipped, has a full-time four-wheel drive system, unlike some of the cars in this segment that are rear-wheel drive until you switch them to all-wheel drive. That means you can use four-wheel drive on any type of surface. Once things get a little bit more serious though, you've got a center differential lock and a rear differential lock. And what that means is that you can apportion torque to all four wheels, and then you can also split torque 50-50 between the rear wheels, which means when you find yourself a nice little slope like this one, you don't have to worry about getting stuck. There's one cool feature on this Prado and also on the 200 series Land Cruiser developed right here in Australia. It's called Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System. And what that is a fancy way of saying it's a hydraulic system that interacts with the anti-roll bars. And what that allows you to do is have flexibility off-road where you get full wheel articulation, but then when you're on-road, it keeps the car super flat, especially when you whip it into that sport mode. One thing I've noticed as we're driving off-road here is just how good this ride is. The suspension system rides on air, and of course that means that you can adjust your comfort levels. And off-road here, there really is no drama at all. I could picture myself doing like 60 Ks of this, although I don't think my wife would like it. We've got a fairly sizable hill coming up here. I've got it in its highest setting, so we're sitting high up off the ground. I'm keen to see how this engine with 450 Newton meters does. I've left it in high range here with just the standard four-wheel drive mode. I love the throttle response here. I'm able to just lean on the throttle and it just really pulls us up without getting overexcited. You get that sometimes with four-wheel drive and it's really bloody annoying. This is fantastic. So it depends who you ask, but I reckon downhill is sometimes harder than uphill, especially when it comes to controlling a car that weighs this much. But we're going to test out some of these off-road features that the Prado has. We'll flick that into neutral, put it into low range. That activates fairly quickly. That allows us to now use crawl control and also the multi-terrain select system. Also brings up this fantastic map on the screen that gives you your angles and you know when you're about to roll this thing over, which we're going to try not to do today. Okay, so crawl mode is on. We've selected that and it allows us to choose how fast we want to go using the multi-terrain select. So I'm going to dial that back to its third setting. I'm going to let go of everything here and it is now going on its own. All right, now I can instantly hear what sounds like a war zone here. It sounds like a machine gun. Have a listen to that. That is the traction control system working to steady the pace of this thing. We'll crank it up a little bit. Let's see how fast we can go down here. Okay, so now it's at its fastest setting. We're doing about 5 to 6 kilometers an hour. This is seriously impressive. That's some really loose stone underneath us, and any other car would be sliding around here. This is quite controlled and very easy, but that noise is just ridiculous. Okay, we're now getting to a very rutted section. I'm having trouble seeing over the bonnet here, but this is coming in handy. So there's cameras on the wing mirrors and the front, and as I move the wheel, it's telling me exactly where everything's going. This is fantastic. So I'm able to predict the location of the wheels and then exactly plot where I want it to go. I can see the extremities of the wheels as well. So we're not going to get into any situations here where the car drops off into ruts, which gets really nasty if it's nice and wet. We've found ourselves some rocks here. Let's test out this multi-terrain select system. So you press the button, flick it around to mogul. Actually, rock and dirt will do. And what it does is, as you're bouncing over these rocks, you tend to whack the throttle every time you come off it, and it loosens up that throttle response and it just makes it a little lazier. Now that may sound like a bad thing, but it's fantastic here because we're getting a continuous bit of momentum as opposed to jerking back and forth, which is what you'd get if I switched it all off. You know, when you go to the swimming pool and there's height markers telling you exactly how deep it is at the deep end so you don't drown? Well, car makers do the same thing for cars, and they've given the Prado a wading depth of 700 millimeters or 70 centimeters. We're going to test that out today and throw it into a pool that is exactly 700 mil deep. Here we go. Oh, it's very muddy. You can't see the bottom. I'll drop it in there. Oh, that's deep. I can hear that around the doors. Oh, that is really deep. That is going through without a drama though. Look at that, without a worry in the world. We could even go deeper if we wanted to. So what about the interior? For Toyota, this actually looks really good. It's conservative, but it looks fresh. It's all let down by that though, the infotainment system. It's a big screen, it has plenty of cool graphics, but it's slow, it's cumbersome, it's hard to put nav addresses in, and it's really fiddly to do DAB digital radio. Plus, there's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. But on the upside, you do get USB plus auxiliary input, which is all good to see. Under here, you may expect a glove box, but oh, look at that, you've got a fridge, so you can put all your kids' drinks in there and keep them busy. And you can always see who started the fight. Using this mirror up here, you can see the entire cabin, which is excellent. Now, speaking of the rest of the cabin, there's plenty of leg and headroom back there, and the second row slides forward and backwards, meaning you can really get comfortable. Plus, there's a DVD screen to keep the kids occupied too. But arguably one of the best features you're going to love about this, and what makes this so family friendly, is in the boot. Picture this, 2 hands full of shopping, 25 kids running around annoying other people. You need to get them into the third row pronto. How do you do it? Well, Toyota has a solution. Hit this button and that third row comes up electronically. While you wait for that, because it will take forever, you can plug an appliance into this 240 volt outlet, which is pretty handy stuff. There it is. Now, question is, can you fit adults into the third row? Let's find out. These third rows are normally for kids, but if you're a designated driver and you've got some well-fed tanked mates, you want to know if they're going to fit. Put that out of the way, slide into here. Get this out of the way so you can see me. This isn't too bad. Fold this back. I've actually got plenty of legroom here, loads of headroom as well. You wouldn't want to sit here for a 12-hour journey, but for a short trip, this is really good. So the answer is yes, you can fit adults into the third row of a Prado. The Toyota Prado is built for clocking up miles, and this is such a great place to be seated. The seat is super comfy, the air suspension's great, and now you can also change between drive modes. We've got Comfort and Eco, Normal, Sport and Sport Plus. No idea what you're ever going to use Sport or Sport Plus for, but the buttons are there anyway. The engine under the bonnet is a 4-cylinder turbocharged diesel, 130 kilowatts of power, 450 newton meters of torque, same engine that you'll find in a Hilux. And while it may be adequate in a Hilux, it lacks a bit of punch in this thing, and that is mainly because it weighs 2.5 tons in Kakadu trim. Toyota has killed and buried the V6 petrol. It's gone, and that's mainly because 98% of Prado sales were diesel. It's the best-selling large SUV in the country, so Toyota really wants to get the mix right for this car. You'll notice that there's a couple of things missing though, and that's partly due to the steering setup. It doesn't have an electrically assisted steering rack like a lot of the cars in this segment. Instead, Toyota's stuck with the hydraulic unit to benefit it off-road. That means it misses out on features like a lane keeping assistant, which tugs at the wheel to get it back into the lane, and it also misses out on semi-automatic parking, so that's just something to keep in mind. Sitting beneath the skin of the Prado is a double wishbone suspension setup at the front and a 4-link coil sprung system at the rear. But in this Kakadu model, you get air springs, and it also has adaptive damping, which means you can then vary how the ride feels. And those buttons that I mentioned earlier, if you whack it in sport, the ride becomes extremely firm, in case, you want to throw it around for some bizarre reason. With towing capacity now at 3,000 kilos with a brake trailer, expect that 8 litres per 100k fuel consumption figure to go up slightly if you do decide to whack a massive load on the back. With Prado pricing kicking off from $53,490 plus on-road costs, this Kakadu model rounds things off at a little over $84,000. Now that places it well ahead of its competitors in terms of price. So we're talking there about Everest, Pajero Sport. While you may not consider them competitors, they are definitely well into the mix of things as ute-based SUVs. At 84 grand, you're looking at things like the top spec V8 Nissan Patrol and an entry-level Land Rover Discovery. So it is quite pricey, but at the end of the day, the Prado really is in a segment of its own. You will see these things getting around Australia towing all sorts of loads, and you cannot kill them. That is why people love them, and they know that there's always a Toyota dealership around the corner, and especially now that you can get it in this fantastic bronze colour. If the Kakadu is a little bit out of your price range, there's sure to be a Prado sitting in the mix there with your name on it. Head to CarAdvice.com to see the full pricing and specs breakdown, and don't forget to subscribe for your full suite of Toyota news.